Listen-only mode.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Origin of Authentic Power webinar. My name is Barb Gettleman and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar will be presented by Kristen Kaufman, and she will also serve as our guest speaker this evening. Our goal tonight is to explore the concept of authenticity in leadership and to learn a little bit more from leadership benchmarks from global leaders and to walk away with a few key tips to become our authentic selves. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. This viewer window will display the presenter's screen when the webinar begins. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows a better view of the presentation. Take a moment to practice at this time. There are a few features of the control panel that you, the attendee, should know. First, be familiar with the Raise Your Hand button. This button is located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to respond to a question being asked by a presenter. Click this button to raise your hand right now. Clicking again will lower your hand. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question at any time this evening, type it into the question box. These may be questions related to the presentation or technical questions related to the GoToWebinar system. You may also be asked by the presenter to type your ideas or responses here as part of an exercise during the webinar. Please send a quick note in your questions pane now. Please know that questions can be submitted at any time. These will be monitored and we will try to respond quickly if we see something that shouldn't wait until the question and answer period, such as making a clarification. During the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or survey. Please take the time to participate, as your input and your ideas are valuable to the group. Be sure to stay attentive and to interact as much as possible during this webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. Try to avoid the distractions of responding to email, checking Facebook, instant messaging, or working on other tasks at your computer. If you need to step away for a moment, do not close the GoToWebinar window, as you will be required to log in again if you wish to rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation using your telephone. Click the Use Telephone option in the audio pane of your control panel to view the conference call number. This webinar is being recorded, and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. Are there any questions? Seeing none at this time, I would now like to turn over the virtual microphone to Miss Kristen Kaufman.
Thank you, Barb. Hi, ladies. I'm so glad that we're going to have this time together. And for those of you up on the East Coast, I hope that you're in safe and sound and that the power will last throughout our time tonight. I'm absolutely delighted to be with y'all, and I hope that this will be a very worthwhile session for you. What I had hoped to accomplish tonight, as Barb mentioned, was to review a little bit about the concept of authenticity and what that really means in business. Just so you have a little bit of background on where I come from. I came from about 25 years experience in corporate America. I was with Hewlett-Packard Company for about 20 years and ran a $3 billion business unit for them in the sales organization, and then left HP to join a software company, served on their executive team for several years, and then ultimately ended up at United Health Group, where I was a vice president for them. So I've had vice presidential roles in 3 publicly traded companies and had to navigate, pretty tough political environments. And frankly, when I started out, which was a long time ago, there was still a minority of women in leadership positions. So we had to struggle with that diversity challenge as well. And then ultimately, I started my own company back in 2007. So that's what brings me to you all tonight. So that's a little bit about my background. But what I wanted to talk about was about the concept of authenticity, why I think that that's probably one of the single most important attributes of leaders today, and frankly, is not always present in the leaders with which we work. I also want to introduce you to a concept that I actually founded my company on called alignment, and a little bit about what alignment means, and I actually think it's synonymous with authenticity. And then introduce you to a few benchmarks that I think all of y'all will recognize. They're all very notable professionals, either in the nonprofit, political, or business space. And what can we learn from those? And then finally, I really want to drive it home to you all as young career women, or women that perhaps are not as youthful as coming right out of college, but are maybe in a transition, maybe in a powerful position, a newly promoted position, and what can you possibly gain from the concept of authenticity. So what I'd like to do is proceed along. If you all have any questions or have any confusion or would like to interact, certainly do type into the chat box so that we can see that, and I can change or augment my content to address what's most important to you. I did receive a few questions, in case those of you are wondering, before the webinar began. So I'm going to do my very best to weave in answers to those questions. And if for some reason you're still unclear, absolutely do not hesitate to send us a note. So with that, again, the goals for tonight: authenticity is the name of the game. We're going to talk about some benchmarks, and then we're going to make it real for those of you, so you leave here tonight with something that you can actually implement tomorrow if you want. All right, so in a nutshell, what does authenticity look like? I mean, we all know when we are working with people whether or not they're the real deal. You know, I know whenever I started out in corporate America, I could spot a fake a mile away. You know, the glad handers, the ones that really didn't feel sincere or genuine in the way in which they interacted with you. So, you know, when I think about folks that are real, and I like to use the term aligned, what I see and what we experience are things like a centeredness, people who are very convicted, you know, to their cause. They're unflappable. They're not what I would call, in the South, we use the term the flipper gibbets. You know, they're not the flipper gibbets, right? They're the ones who are very grounded by like a steel backbone running up and down their spine. Their conviction is notable. They're in the zone. You know when you've worked with people where they're totally in the groove and they're in their zone, they're doing what you know they were meant to do. They're not having to bend themselves into a pretzel, so to speak, to make it seem real. It just comes very natural to them. They're doing what they absolutely were put on the earth to do. They're quite passionate about it. And because of that, people rally behind them naturally. You know, people gravitate to people who are truly authentic in whom they are and what they stand for. They have a tendency to rally people around a common vision, around which everybody's passionate about. They're not confused about it. It's very clear. And from that comes a very undeniable sense of community. And so even in corporate America or nonprofits or educational systems where you have silos or disparate parts, authentic leaders and those that are the real deal have an ability to have people make sacrifices for the common good. You know, they're all truly all for one and one for all and all for one, and they're all rowing in the same direction. With the leader, by the way, rowing too. The leader is absolutely in the mud with them, all pulling toward the same ultimate goal and ultimate purpose. So when I think about authenticity, that's absolutely what I have experienced, and certainly the leaders that I have been gravitated to and that have been magnetic in my career, those are the types of characteristics that they represent. The potential of authenticity and the term alignment is incredible, because in my experience, and I feel certain that y'all have experienced this too, whether it be in the Kappa House or even just in your university experiences or perhaps even in your jobs today, the pressures of life and frankly the recession, all the pressures of possibly losing your job, being passed over for promotion, all the competition in corporate America, those can cause lots of fear in ourselves. We start to question ourselves. Am I doing what I should be doing? Should I be making a different change? And if so, when should I make the change? Why should I be making the change? There's a lot of anxiety about the current reality today. You know, we postponed this webinar last week because of the presidential debate, and there's so much anxiety around the election and who's going to take office and what will that mean for our country and how will that ultimately affect us and our families and our careers. We get very insecure. You know, we get scared that we're going to get fired or laid off. There's going to be a reduction in force, and we could be the ones to be let go. If you are in a leadership position currently, you might be scared that there's going to be resistance from your team if you try to change direction or change course. There's pressure from all different kinds of angles, whether it be shareholders or if you're in a publicly traded company, competitors. The barrier to entry to so many of our markets is so low now that competitors creep up almost overnight. Everybody's got budget constraints. You know, we are resource constrained. There's never enough money and hardly ever enough people to get the jobs done that we think that we need to get done. And frankly, from all of that leads to oftentimes incongruency and misalignment in the ranks, whether that be again in a school, in a nonprofit, whether it be the Junior League or Kappa or Hewlett Packard, oftentimes that's what happens. So when we think about the power of the individual, specifically what do we have control over as people and as individuals, if we have the ability to potentially tap in, truly tap into who we are and what we love to do and ultimately become aligned to that, what comes from that is undeniable self-confidence. And y'all know what I'm talking about. When you see people that are totally in the zone, totally doing what you know they were meant to do, they are unwavering in their self-confidence. They're very centered. They're convicted. They are congruent, meaning that what they want to do, what they believe, what they value, as well as what they're good at, it all kind of lines up, right? When they get pressured from whatever source, there's a lot of grace under pressure because they know who they are. They're very authentic in what they bring to the table, who they are, and why they're doing what they're doing. And then that allows them the ability to lead their teams toward common directions. It enables them to have a very unique ability to reframe a situation. So even if the situation perceives to be very doom and gloom, which quite frankly, there's a lot of that out there, leaders that are authentic and leaders that have a real centered sense of who they are and in total alignment with who they are, they have that ability to reframe it. You know, the half full versus half empty approach. And through that, they create unity in the ranks. There's the ability to get that very powerful common message or common brand to their market, to the world, right? And it's undeniable. And ultimately, as y'all move up in your leadership positions over time, very strong cultures, the only place that strong cultures come from in whatever organization you're in, whether it be a publicly traded company, a school, a nonprofit, a volunteer organization, strong cultures come from a state of alignment. When you're not congruent, when you are ambiguous and a little bit waffly on what it is that you believe and what you stand for, it's almost impossible to build a strong culture that will be sustainable. So that's the end game, okay? So that's that potential of authenticity and alignment, that's the end game. And that's what we're all striving for as individual leaders. The full power for each of you ladies of authenticity and alignment happens when three things. You love what you do, you are good at what you do, and this is really important, it is tied to something greater than yourself. Because if it's not tied to something greater than yourself, meaning a purpose, a cause, something that you truly, truly believe in, you suffer from burnout ultimately. You'll push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, and then ultimately you run out of gasoline. So if it's tied to something greater than yourself, that passion and that desire to contribute to a purpose that will live long after you have been there, that's what will ultimately sustain you. So those are the three magic bullets. That's when the full power of authenticity and alignment happens. When you love what you do, you're very good at it, and it's tied to something greater than yourself. So when you look at leaders, right, leaders that have that alignment and that sense of authenticity, I'm sure you all recognize everybody on this page. And you may be thinking, yeah, well, great, Kristen, but those are like really powerhouse people. Gosh, it looks like most of them are dead now. So what can I really learn from them? And I do think that there are some very pivotal things that we can learn from them. Let's just take Oprah Winfrey just because she's a female. Whether you admire her or not, let's just look at her for a moment. She's probably one of the most influential and not to mention richest people in the world. People listen to her. She is a magnetic force. Again, whether or not you agree with everything that these individuals stand for or how in which they've contributed to the world, it's undeniable that she is a force in which to be reckoned. And if you think about what common denominators she has with perhaps some of the other people on this slide, she is passionate about what she does. She's been very clear that she wants people to live the best life they can. Now, how it manifested for her, obviously, was in the broadcasting field through the magazine publication of Oprah. Now she has her own network, which is going to be debuting or has debuted in almost 100 million homes. So that is really how her desire to contribute manifested. If you go down to Nelson Mandela, okay, Nelson Mandela, who, as I'm sure most of y'all know, was the president of South Africa. He was in prison for like 27 years, on Robben Island. And he did that because he was passionate about apartheid. He had something that he wanted to do that was greater than himself. He was passionate about it. He was convicted. He was very good at what he did. He led that country from a prison cell. So do you think that's aligned? Was he truly being authentic to his purpose in life? I think most people would argue yes. If you look at Mother Teresa, Mother Teresa, frankly, she was an indomitable spirit. When she started the missions of charity in Calcutta in India to serve the poor, it was basically she and maybe 2 or 3 other nuns many, many, many years ago. It now spans to 625 missions around the globe. And I beg to say that I don't think it would be nearly as successful had she not been driven by a cause greater than herself. She was passionate about it. She had rejection after rejection after rejection when she first started. And she continued to show up over and over and over again, bucked up, steel backbone, anchored in her faith, I might add, to help drive that cause forward. Of course, Gandhi, I think everyone knows, he persevered without violence, leading to India's independence. If you're wondering who the woman is right below Gandhi, that's Aung San Suu Kyi. She's the Burmese political prisoner. As many of y'all may know, she was confined in her home for almost 14 out of the past 20 years, trying to get the Democratic Party to free her Burmese people and encourage democracy in her country. So she certainly risked life and limb to make that happen, and will go down in history, no doubt, in her country for making a big difference. She would never have been able to do that had she not been authentic to what she thought her purpose was, what her level of contribution needed to be for her country. She would have burned out long before the 20 years of being kept captive in her home. Of course, Winston Churchill, Britain's prime minister during World War II. I don't know about y'all, but I learned about Winston Churchill from my parents growing up. He was the solidarity of our United States and Britain alliance in the World War II experience. And so it goes without saying that he was a backbone in that entire mission. And of course, Steve Jobs, I come from the technology space, and I could have easily have put up Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, but I don't think many of you would remember who they are because they've been deceased now for almost a decade. But Steve Jobs, was a powering force behind Apple, and many of you may know that his personal life, perhaps was not nearly as aligned as his professional life was, but he was clearly a high-tech visionary. He persevered, when he was diagnosed with cancer of the liver for years before he ultimately succumbed to that disease. And if you ask anyone at Apple, I have many friends at Apple, what will happen to Apple, what's going to happen without Steve Jobs? And their answer has been, and will probably continue to be, at least for the foreseeable future, we will be at the top of our game, because he built such an incredible legacy and such an incredible culture within Apple based upon his sense of who they were, how we want to contribute, what they were good at, tied to something greater than him, right? His vision was to empower everyone in the world with a handheld device that would be easily used. So these leaders, although they may seem kind of far-fetched because they are obviously world-renowned and historical figures, I think we absolutely can learn from them. So, with that, I tried to pull together, there are like five essentials to what I consider to be powerful, authentic, aligned leadership. So we'll start there, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, so what? How do we get that? How do we get what they're having, right? So the first essential for authenticity in leadership is it has to be tied to a purpose greater than yourself. If we as people, whether we be women leaders or just male leaders too, if we only are trying to achieve what's best for us as individuals, we will ultimately peter out, because it's simply not sustainable, nor is it ultimately fulfilling. It has to be tied to something, and that is for you as an individual to determine what that purpose is, but it has to be tied to something that's bigger than ourselves, because that's ultimately where we'll get our fuel. It has to be anchored on a very strong set of non-negotiable values. And in corporate America, and frankly, in pretty much any organization that I work with, values are battered about almost like a cliche. Our corporate values are this, or our team values are that. And I get that, and I'm delighted that people have grabbed on to the notion of a value set. What I would challenge all of us is that those values are not negotiable, and they have to manifest in behaviors. It's one thing to have on a placard when you walk into a corporation, we have a sense of integrity, or we have a value of teamwork. It's a whole nother thing together than to put integrity and teamwork into your daily practice and to measure people and hold people accountable to those values. That is an anchor that every corporation or every organization really needs to have and take seriously. As an individual leader, you got to have a heart. I know that when I first started out in corporate America, frankly, I don't think I really got that. I think that I was so driven and so eager to sell a lot and make a lot of money and get promoted that the heart piece of me, even though it was always there, sort of took a back burner. And what I learned through my career is that heart is the differentiator. When we show compassion and humanity and empathy to the people that we work with, the people that work for us, the people that work alongside us, meaning our peers, and in some cases those could become our competitors when we're ultimately going for a promotion or looking for an opportunity, and they're also looking for it. But to not have that compassion, you will build a brand and a reputation around yourself that will not serve you as you move up the leadership ranks. Showing that compassion and that empathy and helping other people, when you sometimes may think that it might be to your disadvantage, let me assure you it will never, ever be to your disadvantage to help someone else. Sharing your information openly, being open with your ideas, giving people a break when they've made a mistake or they've missed a deadline, giving them a break when they perhaps have not treated you in the most fair way that you would have liked. Certainly we can talk about how to address that and how to have a backbone with that, but having compassion and empathy for people that are in the human condition just like we are, that is imperative. So it's in the middle, but it's not because it's not the most important. Having a heart is a very, very important quality to having authenticity in your leadership journey. You got to have relationships, building those relationships anchored in trust. And I will tell you that nobody gets anywhere on their own, period. So those relationships that you make on your way up, they will absolutely serve you. And I have mentors and relationships that I have had in my life for, my goodness, my entire career. And I'm no longer in technology. I'm no longer in healthcare. And yet there are people that I can still call on when I need them because I treated them with the respect that they deserved, and I believe that they have treated me with the respect that I deserved. And it's a relationship that was built on trust and respect. So as you're moving up the leadership ranks, keep those relationships intact. They will serve you well. And we can talk about how to keep those relationships intact. It's not always about taking. It's about giving as much, if not more, than what you take from these people, and doing it when it has not been solicited. Doing it because you just want to, you want to give to those people, and you do it in a way that's authentic to you so that it doesn't look like brown nosing or trying to butter up. It's truly authentic to you and what you can offer them. And then the last essential, so to speak, and it comes so easily off the tongue, and it's so often hard to do, but you got to live what you value in every aspect of your life. And I remember growing up, my mom and dad had a plaque in our kitchen, and it was entitled "Children Learn What They Live." And I totally believe that. And I will tell you that as a leader and as a corporate player or a small company player or a nonprofit player, how you show up every day will absolutely teach people how to treat you as well. If you're consistent in how you live and how you treat other people, it's really hard for people not to respond in kind. It's like energy begets energy. Sure, there are going to be bullies and there are going to be people who are not going to align with your value set, but that does not give us permission to lower down to their standards. Keeping our standards high, it is and always will be a differentiator because so few people do that consistently. So just know that as a leader, you're being watched all the time. Not just when you're at a podium, not just when you're at the microphone, not just when you're giving a presentation in front of your team or you're in front of a powerful client or customer. It's when you're at the water cooler. It's when you're talking to the person in the mailroom. It's when you're talking to an employee that maybe you have to let go. That's when the true colors show. So those are my 5 essentials, and I think that the 5 leaders or 6 leaders that were on the prior slide would absolutely agree with that. And if you think about their life, pretty much they have attempted to do that. Not that any of us are perfect, because we all are in the human condition, but those have been their guardrails on how they've tried to lead their troops and certainly be an example to those of us who are looking at them from afar. So back to basics. So how do we do that? And it's a big number, right? How do we do that? Step 1, and that's where I want to go now, is we as individuals have to get to know ourselves. And I mean really get to know ourselves. Because the name of the game in being an authentic leader is self-awareness. And if we don't know, who we are, what we love to do, what we're good at, we're going to continue to try things, and they may or may not work, and we're going to just struggle. So, and by the way, this isn't something that happens overnight. Getting to know ourselves really, that happens over oftentimes a lifetime. So this is not a pat, answer. But I'm going to give you 11 steps that I think will help us to reveal who we really are. All right, the first is to observe who we are when we're in the zone. And I don't know, I'm sure most of y'all know what I mean when I'm talking about being in the zone. It's when you're fulfilled. It's when you're happy. It's when you're energized. It's when your heart is singing because you're just loving what you're doing. And you're in the flow. And sometimes that's at work and sometimes it's not at work. So my challenge to us, and I still do this every day because frankly, I don't love everything about my current job, but I do love certain aspects of it. So I try to pay attention to when I'm in the zone and when I'm really grooving, because that's what I really want to focus on. And I want to outsource, or I want to delegate, or I want to pull other people in to do the things that don't really turn me on. So observe what it is that you really love to do. And for those of you all who are perhaps in a job that you're not totally loving, or maybe you're in transition, or maybe you're interviewing for a position, that's like the number one thing. And don't second guess yourself and think, oh, well, I can't make any money doing that, or, I really, I love doing this or that, but I can't really build a career on that. Perhaps a thought would be, don't take it so literally. So let's say that you love baking cookies, right? And you're thinking, well, there's already been one Mrs. Fields. I can't be another Mrs. Fields. Well, okay, that might be true. And yet, what is it that you love about making cookies? Is it the creation process? Is it taking something from scratch? Is it showing something before and after? So almost like a redo or a reinvention of something. So think about what it is that you're really doing when you're in the zone. So that's the first little clip or little tip. The second one, and man, y'all, this one can be really hard. You got to just let go. Because I will tell you, when I started off, I thought I had to do what everybody told me I ought to do. I should do this, I should do that. I mean, the real money's this, the real money's that. And I have to tell you that, yes, you can do that. And yet, if you let go of those expectations and you let go of those ought tos and shoulds and the societal rules and stay pure to what it is that you truly want to do, I will tell you, that is where you will tap into your true power. And it's scary, believe me. When I jumped off the corporate hamster wheel to start this company, I started at the worst possible time. It was in the recession of 2007. I think I was kind of silly to do it at that time. But nevertheless, I had a peace that passed all understanding. Truly. I mean, I didn't really know how I was going to make money, but I knew what I loved to do. I followed that purity of intention. I followed kind of where I got my energy when I was in the zone. And before you know it, the business formed. Alignment Inc. formed. I started writing a blog. I now have like 10,000 followers on that blog. All of a sudden, I was kind of in the groove again, right? And yeah, it's scary, but I will tell you, not until we let go will we really know what our destiny is, because we sometimes put too many restraints on ourselves that are not authentic to ourselves. The third tip, and I know this is hard because we're all kind of social people, but I'm a big believer in being alone. And actually, on the Myers-Briggs, for those of y'all who have taken the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ, so I do get my energy from being by myself. But I will tell you, there's nothing like quiet time and solitude. We have so much noise in our lives today. We're on the phone in the car, we're on the radio, we've got so many frenetic interruptions in our life that it's frankly hard to hear ourselves. It's hard to hear that little voice inside that says, I actually really wanted to be a teacher when I grew up, or I really wanted to write a book when I grew up, or whatever it was that many years ago really made our hearts sing. So if you can find 10 minutes a day to just be by yourself. And when I talk to busy CEOs and executives today, basically what they found is they literally turn off the radio in their car, and when they're driving from point A to point B, that's their alone time. And you know what? It works. It's like, oh, good, I'm in the car and nobody can get to me. I've turned off the phone. I've turned off the radio. I can actually be quiet. So I'm encouraging y'all to be alone, be with your thoughts, open yourself up, and just let what comes into your mind be there. And then I'm going to contradict myself and say, but you got to stay connected, because, you don't want to be a hermit. You don't want to be in a cave. You've got to stay connected. In fact, I wrote a book, which I'm going to talk about later. I actually believe that some of our greatest awarenesses happen from the most insignificant and sometimes unexpected people in our lives, from post office workers to grocery store stackers to people that you meet serendipitously at a networking event. It is amazing, if we are truly awake in the moment, what we can learn from other people. You know, it's like that the old cliche says, if you want to really get to know yourself, get in a relationship. Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. You know, these could be boyfriends and husbands, and they could also be serendipitous relationships that you meet one time, you never see them again, but you stay awake to what the message is that they potentially might have to offer you. So, yes, have solitude time, and yet also stay connected to those around you and to what they potentially could offer and to teach you. Read everything, 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 everything. And I have to tell you, when I was growing up in corporate America, I didn't do that. I read all the business books. I think I was a business book junkie. I read all the business books thinking that they were going to give me some secret to, you know, how to become the next Jack Welch or the next Jeff Immelt of GE. And yes, it was important that I had that foundation of reading those business books. And yet, it was really powerful when I started to open myself to read other things that seemed so far out 30 years ago when I first started reading. Everything from Shirley MacLaine to the Ryrie Bible to, you know, to Joel Osteen to, you know, Marshall Goldsmith. I mean, there are 1,000,001 books that I could recommend. And I'm going to give you all my contact information at the end. If you'd like to get a copy of my alignment library and some suggestions, I would be delighted to share that with you. But my coaching on this is try to open yourself up to reading things that you would not think would be something you would like, and just push yourself to read it to see potentially what it might ignite in you. You might be surprised. Keep a journal. And I know that's a stretch for a lot of people, especially for male executives that I coach and that I work with. But what I would say to you is, even if all you write down is one word a day, or if you write down one thing that you're grateful for a day, you will be amazed at what you will learn about yourself. I kept a journal for, like, I don't know, ever since I was in third grade. So it probably morphed a lot from third grade to now I'm 51 years old. But when I was in third grade, of course, it was who I kissed in the back row of the movie theater, right? And now it's more about philosophical awarenesses that maybe I've had, or some business concept that I want to remember and write about in my next book. But keep a journal. You will be rewarded by the ability to relive things that you perhaps experienced a year later. And you would never be able to recreate that unless you capture it now, because our memories, we don't think about it all the time. So that's my coaching on that, and I do absolutely believe that it will reveal who you are. When I was writing my first book, I used my journals as my source of inspiration and my source of information. So you just never know how it could ultimately manifest in your life. Know and listen to your body, ladies. You know, I don't know if any of you on the call know me, but I feel certain some people will re-listen to this broadcast afterwards. They will know that I had two pretty serious health situations, one in 2001 and one in 2004. And I can tell you, I knew the second time that I had something wrong going on, and I did not listen to it. And you got to listen to your body. You know, it is not a cliche about the mind-body-spirit alliance. The mind-body-spirit alliance is the real deal, people. And so you know when your body's out of sync. You know when things are not jiving the way they need to. So listen to it. Take a yoga class, take a Pilates class, go for a walk, take a hot bath, get a massage, go to a Reiki master. Just get to know your body, because it is amazing what your body will reveal to you, and you will feel truly in your soul and in your gut when you are doing something you really love. You know, you just can't fake it. If there's a lightness in your step, there's a pleasure in your heart that absolutely shows up physiologically as well as mentally. You got to trust your gut and have the courage to follow it. And ladies, this one's a tough one too, because, you know, I have to tell you, every single time every single time I have not listened to my gut and I did not heed my intuition, when I had this little voice saying to me, I don't know, it seems almost too good to be true, you know what? It almost always was. But I didn't have the courage to listen to it and to heed it. So again, my coaching to all of us, and I'm still, learning this too. When you have that little voice inside, that little hit of intuition that says, I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if this is the right thing. Listen to that. Because if we trust our intuition, it is seldom wrong. I remember when I took my last corporate job, ladies, I was absolutely enamored. I think I got intoxicated with the title, with the salary, with the package, the whole thing. I knew within 2 weeks of starting that position that I had made a mistake. And the funny thing is that when the offer was extended to me, in my heart, I kept thinking, this is just too good to be true. Man, I don't know. I don't know about this. And I didn't listen. And had I listened, I probably would not have made that decision. Granted, I learned a great deal from it. I'm very grateful for the experience. In retrospect, at the time, it was an extremely painful experience, but looking back on it, I learned a great deal. So again, my coaching, trust your gut and really, really, really try to have the courage to follow what your intuition is telling you, because it very seldom, if ever, is wrong. Take action. As I love to talk to executives, and of course, it's the infamous cliche, hope is not a strategy, right? We have these visions of sugar plums dancing in our heads, and we think, oh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, or oh, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have X. Well, at the end of the day, a goal is a dream with a deadline. So we have to take action if we want to achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve. And if we want to reveal who we really are, you got to take action on that too. So it's the infamous SMART goals. I'm sure y'all all know what a SMART goal is, but when you start to take action on whatever it is that you are trying to achieve, make your goals specific, make them measurable. I say make them aligned to what you ultimately and how you ultimately want to show up and contribute in the world. Make them realistic and make them time-based. We achieve what we measure. If we don't measure it, it's really, really hard to achieve it. So put together a goal, even if it's a baby goal, and take action against it, and then reward yourself when you achieve it. And that could be as easy as taking a walk tomorrow morning because you've been wanting to walk every morning. Just say, I'm going to take a walk tomorrow morning. Make that goal. Make it very specific. I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock. I'm going to walk for 30 minutes. Whatever it is, and then do it and reward yourself after you've done it. It's kind of cool how that energy will take flight, and it'll continue to foster in you. Be willing to play hard and to fall hard, because I have to tell you, if we don't play hard knowing that we might ultimately fall, we won't really play as hard as we could. And that means going all out. If you really want something, if you really are in the zone and you're loving what you're doing and you really want it, be willing to play hard and be willing to just go for it. And if you fall, guess what? The true sense of an authentic, aligned leader is how they get up. They get up, they dust themselves off, they're still convicted to that cause that is tied to a higher purpose, but they're willing to keep going up for bat. And that's hard. I mean, I have to tell you, having my own business since '07, I've been playing hard and I've fallen hard. I launched my first book on 11/1/11 last year, and it was super exciting, and I'm thrilled that I did it. It was a goal that I had. Did it become a bestseller? Not yet. I had visions that it was going to sell 1 million copies, and I was so pumped I was going to be on Oprah. I had such visions. And did that happen? No. But that's okay. I mean, it was my first book. I'm writing another one. Who knows what's going to happen with that one? So you got to be willing to take the risk and play hard and ultimately fall hard. and just stand tall and know that you've done the best that you could at the time. And the very last tip, is I just believe that you got to stay aligned to a divine power, and whatever that power is for you. For me, when I jumped off the hamster wheel, I had a cush job, I had a powerful position, and I wasn't happy, frankly. I just lost the plot. I did not feel fulfilled. I was not in the zone anymore. It totally was not connected to a higher purpose that I was committed to or I was passionate about. And what anchored me in my jump off the hamster wheel was my faith. That I knew that if I truly was true to myself and got to know myself, which is what this webinar is about, is gosh, how do I get to know who I am and what I'm about? I felt that my faith would sustain me. And you know what? It has. And that's not to say it's been easy. That's not to say that there are nights that I don't cry and I call my Kappa mom and say, Mama, what in the world have I done? I have moments just like everybody else, but I will tell you that staying aligned to a divine power, um, it does provide you that peace that passes all understanding, which I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. There is a peace that passes all understanding. It defies logic. It defies all the pressures of the world. It defies all of that. And it will sustain us, even when we are, at our darkest hour, professionally or personally. So, I just believe that. And again, whatever that divine power is for you. So let's get personal. So as you all are walking out of here, in a little bit, I have a couple of questions that I want y'all to sit with and really, really noodle on. What is holding you back today from being your most aligned self? Is it some story that you've told yourself? Is it a story that society is telling you that you've bought into? Is it an insecurity or a record that I say keeps playing in your psychic mind that, oh my gosh, I can't do that because I wouldn't make enough money to XYZ, or I wouldn't be happy, or I wouldn't be able to be good at it? Get in touch with what is truly holding you back, because that is the root. Determine what the story is that you're telling about yourself to yourself. And the reason why I use the word story, many of you, if not all of you, have read the Little Red Riding Hood story. And, what would Little Red Riding Hood story ever be without the wolf? Every life, every story, every journey has a wolf. It's how we meet the wolf that really tells us who we are and how we're going to show up and how we're going to ultimately fulfill our life's destiny and contribute in the world. It's as simple as that. So you got to get in touch with what's holding you back. What's that story, that gnawing story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves? And if there's a wolf in it, embrace the wolf. Embrace it. It's how we deal with the wolf that ultimately is going to dictate ultimately where we end up. The last question, and this is a big one, and a lot of corporate executives, they love it when I ask this question because it resonates with all of us. How are we saying, yeah, but I can't do XYZ? That yes, but phrase it just stops the game in its tracks. My challenge to you is, how can you change it to yes and? Yes, and. Because the and is a generative word. It opens up possibilities. When I was leaving corporate America, I bet I used yes, but 1,000 times. Yes, but I won't have health benefits. Yes, but I won't have a standard salary. Yes, but I'm going to lose the visibility, which was that ego-driven vice president title, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until I changed and I said, yes, I've had that, and now I'm going to contribute in a different way, that I think, came into my most authentic state. As of right now, not that my life is over, but as of right now, I'm absolutely doing what I think I need to be doing. I feel very aligned in how my strengths and my beliefs and my values, what I love to do, what I hope I'm good at, And it absolutely is tied to something greater than myself. It's all about helping other people find their purpose and help them find where they can contribute to their greatest potential. So those are my 3 questions for y'all as sort of a final takeaway for y'all to noodle on and sit with on how you can become as authentic as I know all of us have the capacity to be. So with that, I have a couple of quotes that I'll leave up on the screen, but I wanted to take a moment because I know several of you all had sent in questions, and at this time I'd like to go ahead and take a stab at answering them. And then if you all have any other questions that you want to enter into the chat line, absolutely do so, and we'll do our best to address them. So one of the questions that was sent in earlier was, how can a person find a balance between being authentic while still being professional? And my answer to that is, I think they're synonymous. So I think the most professional people that I have ever worked with and the most powerful professional people I've worked with are the ones that are truly authentic. The ones that show their vulnerability, the ones that don't put on a face when they don't really know, what the answer is. They admit that they don't have the answer. They tell the truth. If they don't know the answer, or if somebody's answer is not what they agree with, they speak up. They do it with compassion and they do it with directness, and yet they do it. They are authentic in their opinion. They are authentic in where they're coming from, and they're not hesitant to share that with a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion. And frankly, this is going to sound a little airy-fairy, but a lot of love for their clients, their constituents, and their co-workers. So my answer to that is, I think that being authentic, in the definition that we have established tonight, is absolutely a key component in how you can become the most professional and the most powerful that you can be. Another question that was posed was, how can you be an authentic leader in a highly political environment where trust is a real issue? And, I'm going to go back to a couple of things that I said earlier. I think, first of all, you don't control anybody else but yourself. So at the end of the day, ladies, when we are in these, corporate environments, or, oftentimes dysfunctional team environments, remember one thing: you can control only your own behavior. And my dad used to say, he used a cliche, it was wonderful: you can only control your own ABCs, your own attitude, your own behavior, and your own choices. Your own ABCs. You cannot control anybody else's behavior. You may want to. I know I've tried. Believe me, you can't. And you can't control their own attitudes, and you cannot control their choices. You can control how you respond to them, how you behave, and what choices you may make. And that's where your power comes from. So you can become and remain your most authentic self in a political environment by remembering that. And the other, another little tidbit that I will leave you with relative to that question, and I learned it just a few years ago. I was always raised that, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, was the rule that, we were to live by, and I certainly do still embrace that. I also will add to that the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is this: do unto others as you think they would have you do unto them. So as opposed to us putting our projection onto them, try to meet them where they are. And that is a magical, magical approach, because not everybody is going to value what you value. Not everyone is going to respond the way you respond. They're going to respond the way they respond. So the key is to try to figure out what that is and to meet them where they are, and that's the platinum rule. So perhaps that will help with that political environment. A question came up: how do you address unethical conduct in the leadership of a nonprofit volunteer organization? Well, it depends upon the role that you're in. So if you're the president, right, or on the board of that nonprofit organization, certainly if it's unethical, you have a responsibility, and a sacred responsibility, an obligation to have a difficult conversation with those individuals who are acting in a non-ethical way. If you are on a team and you are in a peer environment from a volunteer perspective and you're not able to perhaps exude what I'm going to call positional authority over those people, then my thought would be have a conversation with them about the values of that organization. And again, those values have to manifest into behaviors. So if a value is honesty and trustworthiness, and we're not exemplifying that, we're actually living it in an unethical way, then it's all of our responsibilities as stewards and volunteers of that organization to hold each other accountable to that. Because that's the brand. That's the brand of that organization or of that nonprofit. And if you're diluting it or polluting it with dilute or pollute, either way it's not good, with behavior that is not in service to that organization or flattering to that organization, then we owe it to the organization. Take yourself out of it. We owe it to the organization to have the difficult conversation with anyone who is not acting in an ethical way, and it is not in service to that organization. So that's having a difficult conversation, which, oh, by the way, authentic leaders have on a regular basis. Otherwise, they would not be living in authenticity. There was another question, relative to practical examples of how business leaders can exhibit authenticity. And I'm hopeful that some of the examples that we've talked about tonight have given you a few benchmarks. But I can give you a couple of other sound bites, just practical sound bites on how business leaders can exhibit authenticity. One is showing vulnerability, admitting that you don't know. Vulnerability is probably one of the most powerful attributes of a leader. When we show that we don't know, it is amazing the people who will rally behind you. So show your vulnerability, tell the truth, tell it with compassion and directness, and ask yourself one question: who does this serve? And if it serves a greater purpose, the organization that you're working for, the team you're working for, that is that's your truth serum, that's your true north. So those would be my tips on how to exhibit authenticity in a leadership role. So we are nearing the end. I hope that you've looked at a couple of these quotations. I love the one with Oprah. It was funny, I named my company Alignment before she ever used this quote, and I loved it because it was so validating for me on a universal level. I want to close out with any questions. If you all have any questions, Barb can either open the microphones, if you send her a chat note, if there are any questions that you have, I am more than happy to entertain them, and there's no dumb question. And if you disagree with something I've said, I offer that up too. Please push back if there's something that you did not agree with or you want to discuss.
Kristen, I see no questions at this time.
No questions. Okay. All right. Well, we are then. I actually am going to be giving away my book that I think may have been mentioned in teeing up this webinar. It's a book called "Is This Seat Taken?" and it's a collection of stories that I actually wrote about when I was a global road warrior working for these big companies, and the random encounters that ultimately changed my life. And like I say, it was released 11/1/11 of last year. It's been endorsed by Stephen Covey and Ken Blanchard and a number of other notable leadership folks, and it's been really a fun experience for me. So at this time, I think Barb is going to draw a random number for y'all and is going to announce the winner, and then I'm going to inscribe the book, and it will be coming to you via Kappa headquarters, whoever the lucky participant is.
And Kristen, that lucky participant this evening is Margaret Butler. Congratulations, Margaret.
Oh, Margaret, great, congratulations. I'm thrilled, and I don't know where you were a Kappa, but I will be sure to inscribe it with Kappa love. Always seeking the beautiful and the good. So I have put up here, this is my last slide of the night, and I mean this sincerely. If you all have questions, or if you would like to ask me a career question, or any sort of questions that pertains to leadership or your leadership journey, your corporate experience, nonprofit experience, I hope that you will not hesitate to send me an email. And I also hope you'll sign up for my blog. They're very short and sweet, once a week. I have a very large following. They're not painful to read. They're actually sometimes very humorous but poignant. So feel free to sign up for my blog as well. I have absolutely loved sharing with y'all tonight. And again, if there are any questions at this point, you can chat. Otherwise, I think that we'll be wrapping at this point about 1 minute early from our 1 hour time frame. And I want to thank y'all again for the opportunity to share my perspective on what alignment is, what authenticity is, and what it can mean to you as a leader and in your overall leadership journey.
Kristen, thank you so much. This was such an enlightening webinar, and just thank you all, ladies, for making the time in your evening to join us this evening. Once more, Kristen, a tip of the hat to you, and thank you again all for your participation in this webinar. As Kristen has already shared, if you have any questions or comments about tonight's topic, please email Kristen. Her email address is right there on the slide again. And as we close this webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You'll be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on tonight's webinar. Your feedback, dear Kappa Sisters, will help us shape future webinar training events. And as always, if you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send an email to Karen Holmes, who is a staff member at fraternity headquarters in the education department. And Karen Holmes's email address is kholmes@kkg.org. This concludes tonight's webinar on the origin of authentic power. Thank you all, Kappa Sisters. Have a delightful evening and a terrific week. Bye-bye.